Hi there, Mike Hall here, coming at you from Chicago. Welcome to Big Ten Today, presented by Gatorade. Glad to have you with us over the course of the next 60 minutes. Tons to get to: baseball, softball, lacrosse, and more. But we're going to start things off by looking back at what happened on what was a busy day yesterday. It is our big story, the lacrosse semifinals yesterday. On the women's side, it was Maryland and Northwestern moving on. In Columbus, Chalk survived. Wildcats win over Michigan. Maryland takes down Rutgers. The top two seeds, two iconic programs, by the way, will now be meeting up for the Big Ten title. That happens Saturday, again, on Ohio State's campus. The exact opposite happened on the men's side. The favorites went down. Top seed Penn State lost to Michigan in the first semi, while second seeded Johns Hopkins lost to the Terps in the other one. So it'll be Michigan and Maryland, the 4 and 3 seed, respectively, playing Saturday for the conference crown. That match happening in Baltimore. Our old pal Mark Dixon joining us now to break down everything that happened yesterday. Mark, I want to start with the women, and specifically Northwestern. They've had great offense all year long, had 18 goals in the contest yesterday. They've crossed 300 goals scored on the season, and they've only played 17 games. What's their secret?
That's pretty incredible when you think about that stat line for the Northwestern Wildcats. I think it starts with Izzy Skane. She is in contention for National Player of the Year honors, the Tewaaraton Trophy for the women's game. She's just an incredible talent. But they also have other scoring sources. Haley Radigan, Erin Corkendall, Madison Taylor. These are players that just keep coming at you, and they're great on the draw. They're very strong defensively. They're terrific off the ground. This is just a very well-rounded Northwestern team that is chugging toward another Big Ten championship. They played Maryland a couple weeks ago. Were able to beat the Terrapins 13-6. So they're going to need all components of that, facets of their game, all components of their game to show up tomorrow for this championship tilt.
You brought up Izzy Skane right off the bat. I want to follow up on that. She's the top goal scorer in the land. In that last game, had 4 goals and 4 assists. What do you like when you watch her play?
Just the tenacity and her intensity that she plays the game with. She is such a terrific player, just so talented. I mean, it's just fun to watch. It's really hard to put into 1 or 2 words. She's just so skilled, so tough. She's the total package. And when you consider the fact that she's coming off of a torn ACL from a year ago that caused her to miss the 2022 season, the numbers she's putting up, the performances she is putting forth, it's that much more impressive here in 2023.
You mentioned the fact that they're looking for another Big Ten title, but that might not be enough to satisfy them. If you look big picture on this season for Northwestern, first game of the year at Syracuse, they lose. Since then, they haven't lost, completely undefeated after that first game. How legitimate are their national title dreams this season?
Oh, without question, they are one of, I think, 4 teams that could walk away with a national championship. When you look at Northwestern, and certainly you have that Syracuse team that you mentioned, but the Orange has stumbled a bit as of late. Then you have North Carolina, Boston College, and don't sleep on Maryland either. But Northwestern is a bona fide national championship contender. They haven't tasted defeat since that first game. They know what it takes to win. Kelly Monty-Hiller has 7 rings to show for that. This is a Northwestern team that's also very hungry after leading in the national semifinals for most of the game last year and falling short. That sour taste in their mouth is certainly a motivating factor.
Well, you mentioned Maryland, one of the teams that could prevent Northwestern from winning the national championship. They could prevent them from winning the Big Ten championship because that will be their opponent coming up tomorrow. They scored the first 8 goals in their contest yesterday. Man, they can attack you quickly, huh?
They certainly can. And it starts at the draw circle with Shea Ahern. She is one of the best draw takers, not just in the conference, but in the country. And then you look at the emergence of some scoring. Chrissy Thomas, 6 assists yesterday. Her game has really elevated here in 2023 to go along with scorers like Libby May and Eloise Clevenger. She's another Terrapin who has elevated her game here in 2023. Hannah Lubecker. And then you have Corey Edmondson, one of the best freshmen in the country. So this is a Maryland team that's incredibly athletic, very aggressive. And oh, by the way, they've got some of the best defenders in the land as well. Abby Bosco, Marge Donovan, and they do have probably the best goaltender in the Big Ten, first-team All-American from a year ago, Emily Sterling. So this is a Maryland team that is looking to reverse their fortunes. They fell to Northwestern 13-6 last month. They certainly don't want a repeat of that tomorrow.
I mean, that seems like the matchup to watch, right? Sterling minding the net against this high-powered Northwestern offense. Is that your main focus, or is there any other matchup that you're most looking forward to in this title game?
I think it's how does Maryland defend Izzy Skane? And if they can prevent Izzy Skane from going off, which they did, by the way, back in their meeting on April 22nd, Skane only scored one goal. It's if you limit Skane, you can't let the other players beat you. But Emily Sterling is definitely going to have to be on top of her game tomorrow. She's going to have to come up with double-digit saves in order for Maryland to pull off the upset.
By the way, Mark, give some perspective on this sport, please. This is like Michigan and Alabama meeting in football. This is Duke and UCLA. I mean, these are two all-time programs in this sport.
When you look at the talent on the field, that's just part of the story. Look at the head coaches. Kathy Reese, Kelly Monty Hiller. They were teammates back at the University of Maryland, winning championships year in and year out on the national level, NCAA championships. So you start there. Then you talk about the recruiting that those two go head-to-head. There's a lot of like athletes on both of these teams in Maryland and Northwestern, women that want to come and play in the Big Ten. And then when you look at the history of these two teams and the two coaches as they go head-to-head against each other, Maryland's won national championships, beating Northwestern in the title game, vice versa for the Wildcats. So many subplots starting from the top to the bottom.
Seventh Big Ten tournament championship game in a row for Maryland. You mentioned the 7 titles for Monty Hiller so far. It's going to be a great one Saturday night. As for the men, very different set of circumstances in yesterday's matchups. I mentioned the upsets happened. How surprised were you by what unfolded yesterday?
You know, that's the first time I've been able to watch Michigan play in person. And I walked away incredibly impressed at their toughness, at their composure, and their maturity. And so I was surprised with the result of Michigan beating Penn State. I was more surprised at them limiting T.J. Malone to just 1 goal. The Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year. You have to give a ton of credit to Andrew Darby, a Michigan defenseman, and also Kevin Conry, the head coach of the Wolverines, made a goalie switch at halftime. Shane Carr was struggling a little bit, allowed 10 goals, only made 5 saves. He goes to a freshman, Hunter Taylor, who comes in, stops the first 3 Penn State offerings in the second half, and makes 8 saves in that final 30 minutes to really propel Michigan. So that was my biggest surprise, was Michigan beating Penn State, not in so much as how they beat them, but they didn't back down from the Nittany Lions. The Nittany Lions were the number 1 seed. They are bullies, and they are a tough team and an incredibly talented team. Michigan didn't blink, and they took the game to the Nittany Lions.
You mentioned all the attributes that you were impressed with when it came to Michigan, but how about the confidence? Mark, this is a squad that entered the Big Ten tournament 500 on the season, yet they had the confidence to take down the top seed in Penn State.
I think oftentimes we forget, Mike, that Michigan's at the Division I level, they're only 12 years old. I mean, you can't drive, you can't drink, you can't smoke when you're 12 years old, right? But Michigan is getting the job done. They're still a very young program, and I think those 2 wins at home in front of great crowds against Ohio State in the regular season finale and then in the quarterfinals of the Big Ten tournament, I think that really bolstered the confidence level and the swagger of the Michigan Wolverines. That is what they played with yesterday, and it was really fun to watch.
Their opponent will be Maryland, their 3rd straight Big Ten tournament title game, but they had to earn it, Mark. I mean, they had to climb out of a hole, only 1 goal in the first period yesterday.
Yeah, they were down 3-0 in the first 5 minutes, and then John Tillman called a timeout. And then after that, it was a completely different ball game. I wasn't impressed with some of the tweaks that Hopkins made to their lineup. I mean, they beat Maryland just a couple weeks ago, 12-11. In a terrific win to get them that overall number 2 seed. But Maryland is Maryland, and they're always going to remind you of that. They were missing Ajax Zapatello on the defensive end. John Geppert, their starting long stick midfielder, was limited, but other players stepped up. Freshman Will Schaller, and then Nick Redd, a short stick defensive midfielder, picked up a long pole and just did a tremendous job. But that is Maryland Hopkins. You know, what you saw yesterday is kind of the definition of that series. No lead is too big or too insurmountable. Maryland got their act together, came out, and really took the game to Johns Hopkins and beat them on their own home field. It's going to be really tough for the Blue Jays tomorrow to watch the Wolverines and the Terrapins battling for a conference championship on their home turf.
You mentioned it's the first ever title game appearance for Michigan. Going for 3 straight tourney titles is what Maryland has on the line. Give me something to look forward to in this championship game.
So Michigan beat Maryland 16-11 back on April 1st. Tomorrow starts at the face-off dot. The Wolverines have 2 incredible face-off men, in Justin Wiedfeldt and Nick Rowlett. And Maryland counters with Luke Weirman, really the best in the business. But it's a 2-against-1 situation there. That's first and foremost. Secondly, can Maryland still get production from their first midfield? Jack Brennan scored 2 goals yesterday against Johns Hopkins. It was his first goal since that April 1st game against Michigan. And Owen Murphy showed up in a big way for Hopkins as well. How does Michigan defend them? And then on the flip side, how does Maryland defend Mikey Bain and Josh Shawana? Those are the 2 top goal getters for the Michigan Wolverines. They were sensational yesterday against Penn State. They're going to have to show up. So really, Mike, it's about face-offs and what defense can impose their will on the other team's offense.
Like you mentioned, Michigan got the win when they met about a month ago in a matchup that was at Maryland, the second matchup with the Big Ten championship on the line. Mark, always great chatting with you, man. It's super fun. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mike. Always good to be with you.
So again, a reminder, you want to watch those championship matchups, you can. 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central Time, Michigan and Maryland, and the women play in prime time, 8 Eastern, 7 Central Time, 1 versus 2. Make sure you join us on Saturday. Time to turn our attention to baseball. Here are the series in the Big Ten happening this weekend. Keep an eye in the middle there. Nebraska at Maryland. That's your 3rd place team versus your 1st place team in conference play. And if you don't believe me that that's your 1st place and 3rd place team, switch. There it is. The standings prove it right now. This is how things look in conference right now. I mentioned a moment ago the professor is here. His name is Michael Huff. He's been with us for so long, and I swear I never knew when you were younger your baseball nickname was the professor.
In the minor leagues, yes. Had a manager, guy that was just getting ready to retire, thank goodness. And now you'll know why. He thought reading books as we're on the buses or planes was going to make my eyes tired. He was asking me not to read anymore. When he found out I went to Northwestern, he's like, well, you must be a professor. You read so much.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, no, I just enjoy reading, Stan.
You really thought your eyes would get tired?
Eyes would get tired if I read.
That's obviously ridiculous.
That's a minor league story for all of you kids out there.
I was just going to say, that's obviously ridiculous. Also, I love old school baseball idiocy like that. Like, that is just awesome. That old school stupidity is still like there's part of that charm that goes back 150 years in baseball.
Well, and it really is. And that's kind of like the fun. You're on those buses together. You're taking these plane rides at 6 in the morning because nothing is chartered. And those are the memories that you sometimes remember at the end of the season.
I love it. Well, we're approaching the end of the season for the Big Ten. Only 3 weekends of regular season ball left. There's some big series this weekend. I mentioned Maryland against Nebraska. Why is this big to you, especially from Maryland's point of view in terms of a national perspective?
Well, for Maryland, they finally seem to have found their stride, and this was the one team in the Big Ten that started off being nationally ranked. So you go into Indiana, a team who is 22-1 at home, and you sweep. You not just beat them, but you beat them badly, and your bats came alive. Your pitchers pitched the way you thought they were going to, and now all of a sudden, you're back to being ranked nationally. It seems like once Iowa got ranked, had a bad weekend, they were out. Indiana gets ranked, bad weekend getting out. So now can Maryland, who's back in those national rankings in some of these polls, can they continue that momentum? And they're playing a really good hitting ball club in Nebraska, who their bats can really swing. Can the Maryland pitchers continue to pitch the way they have?
Terps looking for back-to-back regular season titles in the Big Ten. Michigan State will take on Illinois. It's been a disappointing season for the Fighting Illini. It's been a pretty good story for the folks in East Lansing, though.
It really is. The darlings of the Big Ten this year. When you think about the preseason and coaches are going to pick 6 teams, Michigan State was on the outside, not a part of those 6. Illinois was. And so for Illinois, a very disappointing season. But for Michigan State, right now sitting at 27-13, love the way they have come together. Again, a bunch of these guys went out and played great in the summer. Mitch Jebb, the shortstop, went to Cape Cod, ended up being the number 3 ranked overall prospect out in the Cape. So he came back. It seems like there's a new vibe for Jake out there. And the guys from Michigan State, if they can have this in the next 2 weekends, they're going to put themselves in a position not only to be strong in the Big Ten, but all of a sudden maybe be in those rankings RPI-wise that as an at-large, they might make it.
If they close close out this year strong. It could be such a great turnaround. They had 6 wins in conference play last year. They've already got 9 with still 9 Big Ten games to go. So it has been a really nice rejuvenation for them. We are in May, which means it is officially okay to use the word bubble when talking about teams. And we have 2 bubble teams for the Big Ten meeting up this weekend. Right.
You've got 2 teams in Rutgers and Penn State who right now are kind of 2 in or 2 out when you look at the standings right now. And so Rutgers, a team that, again, was one of those preseason darlings that you thought really had a chance to do something special again this year, hopefully get over the hump and get into the NCAA tournament where we all know they should have been last year. And Penn State, who just continues to scrap, playing really well, 10 games over 500. And so here's 2 teams that kind of in some ways look like they're going in opposite directions, but whoever comes out of this one taking 2 out of 3, whoever may sweep, might knock the other one totally out of the Big Ten talk, even if there's 2 weekends left.
You mentioned Rutgers kind of getting squirreled out of last year's tournament.
Yeah.
They had more than 40 wins. They were like the shocker team to not make it last year. We're preseason second in the Big Ten prediction-wise this year. Indiana's taking on Northwestern. This is a time for the Hoosiers to try to turn things around because they had a rough weekend against Maryland.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it was nothing that they had thought about. You get to play at home. You get to play a team that is really good in Maryland. You get to prove after just beating Louisville, a top 10 team, that you are the best in the Big Ten. And what happens? You lose, and not only lose, you lose kind of badly. Not really good. I was surprised at how poorly their pitchers did. I was surprised that hitters didn't do better. But when you're behind almost every game in those first couple innings, as a hitter, you can't help but press a little bit more. And for the pitchers starting to try to get too fine, and it just obviously snowballed on them. But here's a chance. You're going to Northwestern. New coach in Jim Foster. And there's a couple bats at Northwestern that are pretty solid, a couple arms that are really good, but clearly not the depth that Indiana has. So for a Hoosier team, this is a chance for them to get really right. And if they sweep, probably getting back that good mojo they had before.
And you've been mentioning all season long how worried you are about Indiana's pitching. This series they just had, they gave up 43 runs. In 3 games, 16 in one, 14 in another, 13 in another. When you're at this point of the season, though, Michael, if you're on a staff like that, what can you do? How can you try to turn the ship around when you're so far into the season already?
Well, I think as a coach, Jeff Mercer has to be talking to these guys about saying, hey, let's remember we beat Texas. Let's remember we beat Auburn at Auburn, Texas at Texas. We beat Louisville. What were those little things we were doing? We might not try to get so fine where we're hitting those corners for strike one, maybe going into the thirds of the plate. Let's get ahead. Let's have a little bit of movement. Maybe we try to start pitching backwards. You're not starting someone off with the fastball. You're starting them off with the changeup, even down the middle. And do the little things and try to go back and actually go into the tape room and see what it was that they were doing so well earlier in the year that might help them get back to that feeling later in the year here.
One of the hotter teams in the Big Ten has been the Iowa Hawkeyes. They've been on a nice little run of winning games here. They got Ohio State this weekend. What are you looking for there?
Well, again, I'm looking for a little bit of a bounce back. I mean, Iowa really only got to play 2 games at Penn State. They split them. And so Ohio State, new coach, nice team, a lot of talent on the team, but around 500. So for Iowa, this is you're back home. And this is a team in Ohio State that you have to be thinking about taking 2 out of 3, if not sweeping. You, again, are a team that has beaten some nationally ranked clubs. You are a team that has been ranked before. And this is a club in Ohio State, new coach, young, good talent, but someone that you should definitely win. Got to have those pitchers. Got to have those guys come back. We're going to talk about them a little bit later. But really, for Iowa, you're home. You got to have some home cooking. The bats have to stay hot, but their pitchers have to find the strike zone.
You mentioned we'll talk later. We're going to talk some of the individual players you need to keep an eye on this weekend a bit later on in our show. But you mentioned new head coach. There's a new head coach in Michigan, Tracy Smith.
But not really new to the Big Ten.
Exactly. Had a great run at Indiana. Took him to the College World Series. Left to go to the West Coast. He's now back in the Big Ten. So far, what have you seen from him this season?
Well, I've seen a lot of what we saw at Indiana, a manager that knows how to push the right buttons, a manager that's a really good recruiter, with John Kim, a freshman center fielder, doing great. Again, one of those freshmen that I know we're going to see on that all Big Ten freshman team, and a lefty in Connor O'Halloran that is truly the best pitcher in the Big Ten, and he knows how to work with these pitchers. He knows how to work with the players. He knows how to put their team in positions to win, and they're tied for third right now. Again, new coach, a lot of guys that had gone left, draft, everything else, and he's been able able to find some magic and get these guys believing. And again, if they can have one more good series, which they probably should against a Minnesota club again, that isn't quite where we typically see a Minnesota team, but someone that Michigan really should feel comfortable about, not just taking 2 out of 3, but possibly sweeping.
Again, a weird spot for them. They are only 2 games out of first place.
Yes.
They're also only 2 games above 500
overall. I know.
On the season. It'll be Michigan against Minnesota in that last series. Again, Saturday, more softball coming your way. The Wolverines and Gophers continue their series in Minneapolis. Final series in the regular season. Live coverage Saturday, noon Eastern, 11 Central, only right here on the Big Ten Network. Good chance you're going to see Autumn Pease in that game, and she has been saying peace out to her opponents. Look what she's been doing inside the circle. First in the Big Ten in strikeouts for walk ratio, 23 wins as well, and ERA hovering around 1.4. She has been electric, and she's joining us now on the show to talk about not just her great season, but the great season for the team as well. And Autumn, why don't we start with your team overall? Pretty long winning streak you guys have right now. How come?
We knew we were going to be in a tough series with Indiana, as they themselves were on a pretty big win streak. So we kind of just went in those games and thought that we should obviously try as hard as we can. But since then, we've just been taking it one game at a time instead of thinking too far ahead. Because in the beginning of the season, we were obviously thinking about that Big Ten championship. But then once we started thinking about one game at a time, we definitely started riding that wave upwards.
Well, let's get to you personally. It's such a different year for you last year, if for nothing else, because of all the injuries you had to battle last season. How do you describe what last year was like?
Last year was definitely a struggle. I obviously was coming back from my surgery. I think I kind of came back a little too fast, but that's kind of what we do in sports here. So just compared to last year, my confidence has been so much higher because I can throw more games than I was able to last year. And I think I was kind of able to prove last year that I was willing to do whatever I could for the team, and that's kind of just gone over into this season as well. So it's definitely been a lot more fun pitching this year compared to last year with pain. But it's just been great having my team help me through my injury and then into this season.
How close were you to not even returning this season to play ball?
So I had actually told myself over the summer that if my arm wasn't going to get any better, I wasn't going to come back, which I'd never told my coaches. I told them I was coming back for my 5th year. And then after last season, being on a pitch count of 60 pitches, I didn't know if it was really worth it to do that to my arm and have maybe some lifelong damage. So I told myself I was going to take the summer, rehab, see how it went, and then I would make my decision a little bit before school started. And I obviously am here now, so everything went well.
What was it that pushed you over the top to come back?
Well, I did have it's called PRP, so they kind of like use your own body to heal yourself, and I had that procedure done over summer, and I think that really helped me heal. So just doing that and then rehabbing, and obviously I didn't want to give up my sport without knowing that it was my last game ever. So coming back and not really being able to give it up was really the main thing. I don't really want to, I didn't want to just end softball without having known it was my last game, knowing that I didn't have my senior day, and then kind of just stopping abruptly without telling my parents or anything. So it was really a mix of different emotions that brought me back.
How are your mechanics different this year?
I can feel my arm this year. So last year coming back after surgery, my mechanics were definitely different. I couldn't feel my snap of my pitch. I couldn't feel where my arm was at all. So just coming back this year and working on that all of last season, it's kind of great being able to actually feel my snap, which you kind of need when you're throwing some spin pitches. But other than that, everything pretty much feels the same to me.
You're in the running for Big Ten Pitcher of the Year. If you were able to take that home, what would it mean to you?
It's my last year. You always got to make it your best one. So it would just be amazing to be able to be with some of the other great Minnesota pitchers that have been here, because that's what Coach Ritter does, is she breeds great pitchers, really. We all come in with obviously being great ourselves, but then Coach Ritter really makes us that much better. So if I could just be with some of the names like Sarah Groenwegen and Amber Pfizer, it'd be really amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty good company to be in there, Autumn, for sure. Tell me something we don't know about your head coach.
Oh, Coach Ritter. I guess I'd have to say this because we were talking about it yesterday. She she watches Ted Lasso, and she told me this the other day because I also watched Ted Lasso. But she's like, every time you throw a pitch that like isn't good or it's down the middle, I stand there and I grunt. And she's like, so I'm like, ugh. And I'm like, oh, so like Roy Kent. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, that's so funny that she related it to me. But Coach Ritter is definitely, she's tough on you, but she makes you so much better as a pitcher.
Autumn, what's up with the storylines around Nate the Great? He's supposed to be this villain. He left last year's villain. Now they're like humanizing him this season.
I personally don't like Nate the Great. My favorite is Roy Kent. So it's kind of weird that I kind of see myself as Roy Kent, kind of that like stoic personality. But Nate the Great, whatever they're doing with him, I don't know. I already kind of don't like him, so it's weird for them to try to make him better as a person. But
who on the team has the closest relationship to the Jamie Tart Roy Kent friendship?
Ooh, I don't know. We definitely don't have anyone with the Jamie Tart type of personality. But I would say if anyone were to like go at it like those two, it would definitely be me and Addison. She's a freshman on the team, but it's all love, all jokes. So
let me go back to you personally. You transferred to Minnesota from Idaho State after 1 year. How come?
My coaches were getting fired at Idaho State, and what they had done in the athletic department was they were creating a lot of turnover with the athletes, and they were bringing in more people from Idaho, so I was kind of scared that they might do that with the softball team, so I decided that, I might as well get out before essentially I were to get kicked off the team maybe. But the main driving focus was dental school. So I really wanted to go to a school that already had a dental school, and University of Minnesota obviously has that. So it was just a great decision to leave. So honestly, it was mostly academics with a little bit of scaredness that I might be kicked off the team just from the change in the athletic program.
What has Minnesota's dental school been like?
I'm not going to dental school anymore, so it's a little rough, but we just saw a change in my career plans at the end of last semester, so maybe I'll still make it to dental school at some point, and hopefully if I do, I can go to University of Minnesota's dental school because it is one of the best in the nation.
Well, there's a whole lot of options for you out there for sure. What about specifically this Gopher culture though? How long, once you came to Minnesota, did you realize this was the right fit for you and that you were glad you were in this program?
I honestly think back to the first day when we had a camp. So it was the first time I had met any of the girls, and we were having a camp for high schoolers, and I had met Amber Pfizer, and obviously that is she was the face of the program after the World Series. So I was so nervous being a pitcher, meeting this pitcher who's so great, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so scary. She's going to be so mean. And she was literally none of that. She was the nicest and is the nicest person I have probably ever met and played with. So just meeting a girl that was so, she was such a presence in the media, and her just being such a great person, I knew from there that everyone else was going to be like that. And everyone definitely was like that. So.
Who's the unsung hero on this year's team?
On this year's team, I got to give it to Maddie Elke. She has come out and she is just she's put in a DH spot. So she's in the games, she's not in the games, but every time she is in the games, she's performing. And she is the absolute queen of doubles. I swear all she can hit is doubles.
It's a good thing to have. You always love seeing that in the lineup. Hey, before we let you go, I know we've got, the final matchup with Michigan to end the regular season, but then it's the Big Ten tournament. Finish this sentence for me. We're going to win the Big Ten tournament if
we keep playing how we're playing. If we play as a unit like we have been, our chemistry is definitely what's pushing us to win all these games. So if we keep with our chemistry, we will definitely win the Big Ten tournament.
For your sake, I hope it holds up as well. Autumn, thanks so much. Next time you want to talk Ted Lasso, you know where to go, right here.
Thank you so much.